That country? Iran. And it's already testing the waters.
Iran is provoking a conflict. I think a big question is whether President Biden and his team can figure out a way to stop them.
President Biden plans to enter negotiations with Iran and possibly re-enter the controversial nuclear deal that President Obama made with Biden as his vice president. President Trump pulled out of the deal while also slapping sanctions on the regime.
Negotiation would be a good way to do it. Nobody wants a war in this region again, but Biden is going to be tested.
Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg says Iran is telegraphing intentions by taking rogue action. The regime recently seized the South Korean tanker and its crew near the Strait of Hormuz and also raised its uranium enrichment level, putting it on course to develop a nuclear weapon. Rosenberg says it's important that Biden and his team of advisors learned from the mistakes of his former boss, such as not including regional players like Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, and the Saudis when negotiating the Iranian nuclear deal.
But also the flaws in the deal that didn't deal with missiles, that didn't deal with terrorism, that didn't deal with any of these other issues, and left all these loopholes.
Loopholes like Iran's widespread use of proxies across the Middle East, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, and militias in Iraq that have attacked U.S. troops there.
The Iranian art of war is based on fighting on other people's lands by other people's hands.
Israeli Reserve Brigadier General Asaf Orion says the biggest factor shaping the Middle East right now is America's transition of power.
Trump gave the Iranians the impression that he's pretty unpredictable.
According to Orion, the Iranians took extreme caution about launching attacks against the U.S. with Trump in office.
The stage is set for the Biden administration. While we focus on the nuclear as the most severe threat, we shouldn't overlook Iran's dual strategy of doing also indirect proxy warfare across the Middle East.
Rosenberg adds Biden must keep maximum pressure on Iran to create the right conditions to negotiate and avoid war.
All eyes are going to be on Biden. And if he flinches in the light of Iran's intransigence, it's going to be a very troubled season ahead.
Well, for more on this story, Chris Mitchell joins us now live from Jerusalem. And Chris, what, in your view, has to happen for the U.S. to re-enter an Iranian nuclear deal?
Well, Gordon, I think there would be three things that would make it a better deal. First of all, enrichment uranium. Actually, before the 2015 Iranian nuclear deal, the UN actually prohibited Iran from actually enriching uranium. That would be one thing to address. The other thing to address, as mentioned in the report, would be the ballistic missiles. And the third thing would be being able to inspect military sites. And there has been, information just came out that actually Iran is developing uranium metal, which is actually used for a nuclear device. So those three things, enriched uranium up to weapons grade, ballistic missiles, and a nuclear device developed in some of these military sites, all those three could have a potentially nuclear Iran. So those are the three things that would make it a better deal. Whether or not that's going to happen remains to be seen.
Well, I'm really surprised the Biden administration wants to reopen talks with Iran just because of their provocations recently. They launched a drone attack against Saudi Arabia, the oil refineries there, the proxy war in Yemen, the proxy war they've been waging for decades against Israel out of Hezbollah. It just doesn't make any sense to me that you would want to engage in talks with them as long as these provocations are happening. We came very close to war with Iran because they shot down one of our Navy drones. I just don't understand why you would want to do this and want to do this as sort of the opening of your new administration. Do you have any idea what's the end game here?
Well, the end game right now, at least the beginning game, and it was announced by Anthony Blinken in his testimony before the summit that they want to improve the nuclear deal. But Iran says we're not going to go back to a new deal. We want to go back to the old one. And that has so many flaws that it doesn't address ballistic missiles. You can't inspect military sites. And it does seem like it's the same act number 2 of the Iranian nuclear deal with, Gordon, many of the same players. Wendy Sherman negotiated the Iranian nuclear deal in 2015. Right now, she's Assistant Secretary of State. Susan Rice is going to be in the administration as well. So it seems as if they have the same ideas coming into this negotiation as they did in 2015. They seem to be putting a blind eye to all the things you mentioned, the attack in Saudi Arabia, Hezbollah on Israel's northern border, what they've done in Syria as well, and in Yemen. And the deal as well did not address all these nefarious activities of Iran trying to export its ideology throughout the Middle East and destabilizing the Middle East right now.
This has to scare the leadership in Israel. What advice are they giving the incoming administration?
Well, right now it appears that Yossi Cohen, who's the head of the Mossad, is going to meet with President Biden sometime maybe this month or next month. And I'm sure he's going to list exactly what Israel's concerns are. Some people think it's going to be a pro forma meeting and that the Biden administration is going to continue on what he believes is the right path towards Iran. You know what it does, Gordon? It really brings up the possibility of an Israeli military strike. In fact, retired General Yaakov Amidror, we've interviewed him before. He said just recently that if the U.S. goes back into this deal, it really does open up a military option for Israel that really had been sort of on the table for the past 4 years with the Trump administration and their campaign of maximum pressure and sanctions. But if you release those sanctions, if you go back into this deal, Israel, this is the #1 red line for Israel across the political spectrum. They will not allow Iran to get a nuclear device. So it really does open up this possibility of a military option by Israel against Iran.
Well, it has to be completely unacceptable for the other Muslim nations. I mean, Saudi Arabia can't possibly want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. I kind of doubt Turkey would want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Could we see some rather unusual alliances in order to stop it?
I think exactly we will. In fact, I think the Abraham Accords has set up sort of the framework for this alliance of the Sunni Arab nations, which see Iran as just as much of a mortal threat and an existential threat as Israel. So these relationships between, you can go to Jordan, Egypt, especially Saudi Arabia, which just is around the other side of the Persian Gulf, the UAE, Bahrain. So I think we will be seeing these strange alliances against Iran. Remember that the UAE is asking for F-35s, Patriot missile batteries, and perhaps Iron Dome batteries, maybe in Saudi Arabia. So all this is part of a growing possibility of this alliances within the Middle East forming against Iran.
A viewer asked on Facebook, how similar to Obama could we see President Biden's policies and responses to the Iran deal?
Well, to that viewer, I would say almost it seems identical. It seems like this is the second act or Obama 2.0 in the Biden administration. Many of the same players, as I mentioned, Wendy Sherman, Susan Rice. These are all the people that actually developed the JCPOA, which is called the Iranian nuclear deal. And so I think they have the same ideas of maybe bringing in to Iran into the family of nations. We had an interesting conversation with the now former Ambassador David Friedman of the U.S. to Israel, where he said that 5 years ago, you could argue that, if you have this deal, then Iran is going to self-modulate, it's going to self-correct. 5 years later, we know that wasn't true. They used the billions of dollars they get by lifting the sanctions to spread their ideology throughout the Middle East, continue their nuclear program. So it seems as if we're seeing the same play being acted here 4 years after the Trump administration began.
Well, Chris, thanks for your insight. And for you at home, you can always get the latest on news from Israel by downloading the CBN News channel. You can watch Chris's show, Israel Jerusalem Dateline. It's all available on the CBN News Channel app, so download it today. Hello, I'm Gordon Robertson. Thanks for watching the video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more encouraging videos like this one. Welcome to the 700 Club Interactive family, and God bless you.